The night was colder than death on planet Nareth 9. The wind howled like a hungry beast, dragging sharp crystals of ice across the empty land. Everything was silent, everything was dying. And in that silence walked a lone human, Elias, his breath freezing in the air like smoke from a dying fire. He had crash-landed hours ago, his ship broken beyond repair. The storm had destroyed his signal beacon, and his suit's heat core was almost empty. He walked and walked, searching for a light, a sound, any sign of life. But Nareth was not a world for humans. It was a world that forgot what warmth meant. Then far in the distance, he saw something, a flicker, faint and trembling, like a candle fighting to stay alive. He followed it through the snow, his legs numb, his body shaking, and at last he reached a small, broken shelter made from scrap metal and stone. Inside, he heard the weak cry of a child. That sound stopped him. It was too soft, too fragile for a world like this. He stepped inside carefully and saw them, an alien mother. Her skin pale blue, her eyes wide with fear. She held a small child wrapped in torn cloth. When she saw the human, she raised a sharp bone knife. Her hands trembling. "Stay back," she hissed. Her voice rough from cold, Elias lifted his hand slowly. "I mean no harm," he said gently, his voice weak but calm. "I just need shelter." The mother's knife didn't lower. "Humans bring fire and hunger," she said bitterly. "You'll steal what little we have." Elias looked around. The room had almost nothing, only a few burned sticks and a piece of frozen bread. "I won't take anything," he whispered. "I only ask to stay until the storm passes." The woman stared at him for a long moment. Then, as the wind screamed louder outside, she made a choice that would change both their lives. "You have warmth," she said quietly, looking at the small heater on his belt. "I can feel it from here," Elias nodded. "It's all I have left." She looked down at her child. The little one's lips were turning purple, his breathing shallow. And then she said something that made Elias forget the cold for a second. She said, "Take him. Take my child. Just for tonight, let him sleep near your heater. Let him live until morning." Elias froze. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. This mother, this stranger, was offering her child's life for a night's warmth. Not for food, not for safety, just warmth. He saw her eyes, not cruel, not selfish, only empty, filled with the hopelessness of someone who had already lost too much. Elias knelt down beside her. He looked at the small alien child, thin, shaking, his tiny fingers reaching for light, and Elias felt something deep inside him break. He thought of Earth, of the stories humans told, stories of kindness, sacrifice, love, and he realized he couldn't take her offer. He unhooked his small heater and placed it beside the mother and child. Then he took off his own insulated jacket and wrapped it around them. The woman looked up in shock. "What are you doing?" she asked. Elias smiled faintly. "If I take warmth from a child, then I don't deserve to live." He turned away and sat near the doorway, his body trembling, his lips turning pale. Hours passed. The storm raged louder. Elias could barely feel his fingers. He closed his eyes and listened to the faint sound of the heater humming beside the sleeping child. He whispered to himself, just a few more hours. Just until sunrise. The mother woke once in the night and saw him sitting in the corner covered in frost. His eyes half closed. She wanted to tell him to come closer, to share the heat. But when she tried to move, she saw her child smiling faintly in his sleep for the first time in months. She couldn't take that away. By dawn, the storm was gone, the sky turned pale silver. The mother stepped outside, snow crunching under her feet. She looked down. Elias lay half buried in snow, his body still, his hands frozen around a small power core that he had kept running through the night. She dropped to her knees, her breath breaking into tears. The human who came from the stars had given his warmth not for trade, not for survival, but for love, something no being on Nareth could understand. As the morning light touched his frozen face, the mother whispered through her tears, "Why? Why would a human do this?" And somewhere beneath the ice, the small power core still glowed, steady and warm, the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. The sun rose weakly over the frozen plains of Nareth 9. Its light was pale, thin, almost afraid to touch the ground. The storm had ended, but the world still looked dead, covered in endless white silence. Inside the broken shelter, the small alien child, Nan, opened his glowing blue eyes. He felt warmth for the first time in weeks. His tiny fingers reached toward the small heater beside him. Its power almost gone, beside it lay his mother, Lyra, her arms wrapped around him tightly. Her body was weak, but her heart still beat. She had survived the night. But when she turned her head and looked toward the doorway, her breath caught in her throat. Elias was lying outside in the snow. His body was still, his face pale and covered in frost. For a moment, Lyra's mind went blank. She rushed to him, her legs shaking, her voice breaking. "Human! Elias, wake up!" No answer came, only the sound of the wind brushing over the ruins. She touched his skin, cold, lifeless. But then she saw it. The small power core in his hand was still glowing faintly. He had kept it running all night, keeping the heater alive. Keeping them alive, tears filled her eyes. The same tears she thought her kind had forgotten how to cry. She pressed her hands over his chest, trying to feel for a heartbeat. There was one, slow, weak, but still there. The human had not given up yet. Lyra dragged him inside the shelter. Her hands trembling, her breath heavy, she searched through her small bag and found a cracked glass vial. Healing gel, something her people used in battle long ago. It was meant for her child, but she didn't hesitate. She poured it over Elias's chest, whispering to the air, "Don't die, human. Not after what you did." The gel hissed and steamed as it touched his frozen skin. His fingers twitched slightly, minutes passed like hours. Then Elias coughed, a rough, painful sound. His eyes opened halfway, unfocused, confused. He saw Lyra's tear-streaked face and the child sleeping beside the heater. A weak smile formed on his lips. "Good. They're warm," he whispered. Lyra stared at him, her heart torn between gratitude and disbelief. "Why would you do this?" she asked softly. Elias closed his eyes for a moment and said, "Because no child should be traded for warmth." His words echoed in the small shelter like a forgotten truth. Lyra turned away, hiding her tears in her world. Survival always came first. Compassion was a luxury no one could afford, but this human, he had given everything without asking for anything. News of what happened spread quickly through the nearby ruins. A few surviving villagers came to see the mad human who had nearly died for another species' child. They stood at the doorway, whispering among themselves, "He gave his heat away? To an outsider's child? No human would do that." "No one would," the old village elder, bent and wrapped in rags, stepped forward. His eyes glowed dimly with age and suspicion. He looked at Elias lying weak but alive and asked, "Do you know where you are, human?" Elias struggled to sit up, his breath shallow. "A cold place," he said with a faint grin, and full of questions. The elder's voice was rough. "You risked your life for an exile and her cursed child. Why?" Elias looked at Lyra and Nain, then back at the elder. "Because maybe warmth means more when you give it away." The elder said nothing for a long time, only staring at him. Finally, he turned to the villagers and said, "Let him rest. He has done more for our kind than we have for each other." That night, while Elias recovered, Lyra told him the truth. Her child, Nain, was born with unstable energy veins, a rare mutation that made his body dangerous. His energy flared uncontrollably. He could hurt others without meaning to. That was why the village had cast them out. Elias listened quietly, not with fear but with curiosity. He touched the small scanner on his wrist, its faint light flickering. "Unstable energy, huh?" he said softly. "Maybe I can help." Lyra blinked in disbelief. "You can't fix him. Even our best healers failed." Elias smiled weakly. "Maybe they were trying to heal him. I'll try to understand him." Outside, the snow fell again. The world was still cruel, still cold. But in that tiny shelter, something had changed. Hope, the rarest warmth of all, had begun to grow. The villagers whispered again that night. They spoke of a human who came from the stars and melted the frost that even time couldn't break. And far away under the dim light of the moons, the old elder watched the shelter and muttered to himself, "Maybe the stories about humans were true. The human who gave warmth might also bring something far more dangerous to Nerith, a heart that refused to freeze." The storm returned 2 nights later, roaring like a monster across the frozen plains. But inside the small shelter a new warmth flickered, not from fire, but from hope. Elias had recovered enough to stand. Though his hands still shook from the cold that nearly took his life, he spent most of his time beside the alien child, Nain, studying the strange glowing veins that pulsed softly beneath his pale blue skin. The light inside Nain's veins was beautiful, but unstable. Sometimes it shone gently like stars, and other times it sparked wildly, throwing off small bursts of energy that cracked the air like lightning. Every time that happened, Lyra flinched and pulled her son close. Elias noticed the fear in her eyes. Not fear for her son, but of him. What's happening to him? Elias asked quietly one night. Lyra hesitated, her eyes reflecting the dull glow of the heater. Then she finally spoke. "It's called the curse of veins," she said, her voice trembling. "Children born with this do not live long. Their energy burns them from the inside, and sometimes it kills others around them." Elias frowned. "So the others exiled you because of this?" Lyra nodded slowly, tears sliding down her cheeks. "They said my child was a danger. They said he would destroy us all one day." Her voice broke. "I begged them for help, but they closed their gates and told me to let the cold take him." Elias looked at the small boy sleeping beside the heater. The gentle hum of the power core filled the silence. He thought of Earth again, of hospitals, machines, and doctors who never gave up. In his world, sickness was a challenge. "Not a curse, maybe," he said softly. "Your people were wrong." That night, while Lyra slept, Elias began working. He laid out small pieces of scrap metal and old energy chips he'd salvaged from his wrecked ship. With trembling hands, he started sketching on a cracked tablet. Diagrams of circuits, energy flows, neural links, he whispered to himself. If the energy is unstable, it needs a regulator, something to guide it. The next morning, Lyra woke up to the sound of soft tapping. Elias sat near the door, surrounded by metal shards and glowing tools. "What are you doing?" she asked, still half asleep. He smiled faintly. Building hope, she watched him for hours. Unsure if he was genius or mad, he worked without rest, without food, without thought of anything else. When the villagers came to check on them, they found the humans surrounded by strange wires and lights. One of them, an older alien with scarred arms, laughed bitterly. "You think you can fix the cursed child with metal?" Elias didn't look up. "Maybe," he said. "Machines don't have faith, but they can still save lives." The elder, who stood behind them, said nothing. He only watched, his ancient eyes filled with curiosity. Humans were known in the galaxy as dangerous, emotional creatures and quick to fight. Quick to forgive, but this one seemed different. He worked not for reward or pride, but for something the galaxy had forgotten. Compassion. As night fell again, Elias connected the final pieces together. He had built a small glowing device shaped like a ring with thin wires and a crystal core. "This," he said, holding it up carefully, "might help stabilize his energy." Lyra's eyes widened. "You made this from scrap?" Elias smiled tiredly. "Scrap is just something waiting for purpose." When he tried to attach the device to Nain's chest, the boy's veins flared violently. The light turned red. The air around them shook. Nain screamed in pain, and Lyra cried out, pulling him away. "What are you doing?" "You're hurting him." Elias dropped the device, his heart pounding. I didn't mean to. The readings were wrong," he stammered, guilt washing over him. The villagers outside shouted, "See? The human's killing the child. Throw him out before he burns us all." Elias looked at the terrified faces at the door, then at Lyra holding her child. He felt the weight of failure pressing down on him like the cold outside. But deep in his heart, a quiet voice said, "Don't stop now." He picked up the broken device and whispered, "I can fix it. I just need more time." Lyra looked at him, her face torn between anger and hope. "You almost killed him," she said through tears. Elias nodded. "I know, but I also saw something." His energy responded for a moment, like it was listening to me. Lyra stared at him in silence. No one had ever spoken about her child with such belief before. Finally, she said softly, "Then I will give you time. Human." She placed her trembling hand on his shoulder. "But if you fail again, we all die." Elias nodded slowly, determination in his eyes. He sat back down beside his tools. Outside, thunder cracked across the frozen sky. Inside, the human and the cursed child were bound by something neither of their worlds could understand. The stubborn spark of hope. And far above Nareth 9, deep in the dark clouds, an orbiting probe sent a faint signal across the galaxy. A warning. Human presence detected, unauthorized experiments in progress. The message raced through the stars toward the Galactic Council, and with it began the chain of events that would soon shake every world that thought humans were weak. Days passed like ghosts drifting through the frozen ruins of Nareth 9. The wind outside never rested, but inside the small shelter, a different storm was brewing, a storm of ideas. Of hope and of fear, Elias worked endlessly, his human hands raw and trembling. Every tool he used was half broken, every part scavenged from the remains of his crashed ship. Yet he worked as if the fate of the stars depended on it. The small alien child Nayan watched him silently, his bright veins pulsing like blue fire beneath his skin. Sometimes the light grew too strong, shaking the room, and Elias would gently place his hand on the boy's shoulder and whisper, "Easy now. You're stronger than this energy." The boy didn't understand his words completely, but he understood the warmth in his tone, and that warmth was something Nan had never felt from anyone but his mother. Lyra watched from the corner, torn between trust and fear. She had seen Elias nearly die trying to save them, yet each day she saw him risk more. He ate little, slept even less, and spoke softly to machines as if they could hear him. Sometimes she wanted to stop him, to tell him it was hopeless, but then she saw the look in his eyes. It was the look of someone who refused to accept that a life could be called a curse. One night, Elias finally connected the last piece. He wiped the sweat from his brow and stared at the small glowing sphere on his workbench. It was made from scraps of alien tech and human circuitry. "This is it," he whispered to himself, "a regulator. A heart for a heart." Lyra stepped closer, her voice uncertain. "You think this machine will save him?" Elias nodded slowly. "It won't cure him, but it might teach his energy to breathe." Lyra didn't fully understand his words, but she wanted to believe. For the first time since exile, she felt that maybe her son could have a future. When Elias prepared to test the device, the villagers gathered outside the shelter. They muttered and hissed among themselves. "The human is trying to play God. He'll kill the child this time." But none of them dared step in. They wanted to watch to see if the mad human would succeed or burn. Elias looked at Lyra and said softly, "Once I connect this, there's no turning back." Lyra's hands shook as she held her son close. "Do it," she said. "We've already lost everything else." Elias pressed the small regulator onto Nain's chest. The device attached with a faint click. The lights flickered for a second. It worked. The glowing vein stabilized. The child breathed smoothly. Lyra gasped in joy. "It's working!" But then the light changed. Blue turned to violent red. Nain screamed, his body shaking violently, energy surging out of control. The room filled with sparks and crackling air. Elias grabbed the regulator, trying to disconnect it. "Come on, hold together," he shouted, his voice desperate. But the device shattered, and Nain collapsed in his mother's arms. Unconscious, Lyra screamed, holding her son tight. Elias stared at his trembling hands, the failure cutting deep into his heart. The villagers rushed in, shouting, "You killed him! You cursed us all!" They threw stones, their anger louder than the storm outside. Elias didn't move, and he took every word, every hit as if he deserved them all. The elder appeared at the doorway, his staff striking the ground. "Enough!" he thundered, his voice echoing across the frozen street. The crowd fell silent. The elder looked at Elias. "You tried to change what nature has decided," he said coldly. Elias looked up, his eyes filled with quiet fire. "Nature doesn't decide who deserves to live," he said. "We do." The elder stared for a long time, then turned away. "Leave him," he said to the crowd. "If the storm doesn't take him, the curse will." That night, the shelter was silent except for the faint hum of the broken regulator. Nain lay weak but alive, breathing slowly. Lyra sat beside Elias, who stared at the floor. "I failed," he said softly. Lyra shook her head. "No, you tried." He looked at her, his voice trembling. "Trying isn't enough when lives are on the line," but then a faint sound broke the silence. Nain's heartbeat. Steady and calm, the glowing veins no longer flickered wildly. They pulsed gently like a calm sea. Elias blinked, confused. "Wait." "He's stabilizing," Lyra gasped, holding her child close. "He's breathing normally." Elias checked the shattered regulator. The fragments were still glowing faintly. Somehow part of it had fused with Nain's energy naturally. The machine had failed, but the connection had worked. Elias smiled faintly, whispering, "You fixed yourself, kid." Lyra looked at him, her eyes soft. "No, you gave him the chance." Outside, the wind began to calm and the snowflakes fell gently. The villagers watching from afar saw a strange light coming from the shelter. Soft, golden, peaceful, for the first time in years. The frozen village felt warmth that wasn't from fire, but far beyond Nareth 9. The signal from the probe had reached the Galactic Council. An emergency alert flashed across the stars. Unauthorized human technology detected in alien biological systems. And in the grand halls of the council, someone whispered, "If a human has done this, it could change everything." Back on Nareth, Elias sat near the sleeping child, the broken device in his hands. He didn't know that his act of kindness had already started a storm bigger than any on this frozen world, a storm that would test the laws of the galaxy itself. The nights on Nareth 9 grew colder again, but inside the shelter, something impossible had happened. The alien child Nayan was alive, breathing evenly for the first time. The glowing veins under his skin no longer flared with violent light. They pulsed in slow rhythm, gentle as a heartbeat. The broken regulator, half melted and fused into his chest, glowed faintly, like a tiny sun that refused to die. Elias sat quietly beside him, staring at the strange light. His hands were covered in cuts, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights, but deep inside, something burned brighter than exhaustion. Determination, he whispered to himself. He's stable for now, but this won't last. The energy inside him will grow again. He knew it. He could feel it. The temporary balance would soon collapse. And when it did, Nain's body might not survive. Lyra sat near the heater, her eyes filled with both hope and fear. Every time she looked at her child, she wanted to smile, but the worry never left her face. "Can you fix him, Elias?" she asked softly. The human didn't answer immediately. He turned the broken regulator in his hand, watching its dim blue glow fade and brighten like a dying star. Finally, he said, "Maybe, but not with machines." Lyra frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Elias looked at her with tired eyes. "His body rejects alien metal, rejects everything I make, but when I linked the power through my suit, it responded." She blinked. "You mean?" "Yes," he interrupted. His energy connected to mine. He stared at his own hands. Faint scars of blue light ran beneath his skin, glowing softly. It was a sign that a small part of Nain's unstable energy had already bonded to him. That was when the idea, the unthinkable plan, began to form in his mind. "What if," he whispered, "I could link directly to him? Not through metal, but through myself?" Lyra's eyes widened in horror. "You're talking about energy sharing," she said. "That's forbidden. Even our healers don't do that. It burns both lives at once." Elias nodded slowly. "I know. But if his body keeps rejecting machines, maybe it needs something alive. Something willing to carry the chaos." Lyra shook her head violently. "No, human, you'll die." Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe, but if it saves him, that's enough." For a long moment, silence filled the shelter. The only sound was Nain's soft breathing and the whisper of the wind outside. Lyra wanted to scream, to stop him, to beg him not to do something so foolish. But then she looked at her child, at his small hand clutching her torn shawl, and her heart broke again. She whispered, "You would give your life for someone not even your kind." Elias looked at her gently. Kindness doesn't need a kind. That night, while Nain slept, Elias began to prepare. He adjusted the remnants of the regulator and connected it to his own suit. He mapped the flow of energy from Nain's veins and calculated how much he could carry before his body collapsed. It wasn't much, just enough to give the child a chance. He smiled weakly. One human heart might just be enough. The next morning, when the first pale light of dawn touched the ice fields, Lyra woke up to the sound of Elias working again. She stood at the doorway and saw him attaching small wires from his chest to the glowing veins on Nain's arm. "Elias, stop!" she cried. "Please, you'll kill yourself." He looked back at her with calm eyes. "If I do nothing, he dies anyway." Then he pressed the final switch. The world exploded in light. A powerful surge of energy raced through both their bodies. Elias screamed, his veins glowing bright blue as the alien energy rushed into him. Nain's body trembled, his eyes snapping open, glowing like twin stars. The machines around them shattered from the overload, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Lyra screamed their names, the light blinding her. When the glow finally faded, both of them were lying still. Smoke filled the air, and the heater had gone dark for a terrible moment. Lyra thought they were both dead. Then, Elias gasped, his chest rising weakly. Nain opened his eyes, calm, peaceful. His light steady and soft, the connection had worked. Elias had stabilized him by sharing his own life energy. Lyra knelt beside them, crying in disbelief. Elias's voice was barely a whisper. It worked. His energy is balanced now. Lyra touched his face. But you look different. Elias's eyes flickered faintly with the same blue glow as Nain's. He smiled. Maybe I am. Outside, the villagers had gathered again, drawn by the blinding light. They saw the human lying weak beside the healed child. And for the first time, they didn't call him mad. They bowed their heads. The elder whispered, "He shared his life with another species. Such a thing has never been done, but not everyone saw it as a miracle." Far away, deep in orbit, the Galactic Council's surveillance drone recorded everything. It transmitted the footage instantly. A human performing forbidden biolinking. Across the stars, alarms began to sound. The Council declared it an act of biological contamination, a violation of the highest law. Back in the shelter, Elias lay motionless. Lyra held his hand and whispered, "You gave him life. But what will they do to you now?" Outside, snow began to fall again, silent and endless. But for the first time on Nareth 9, the cold didn't feel hopeless. Because one human had done something the galaxy said was impossible. He had shared his warmth and his life. The storm had passed, but silence remained. The kind of silence that comes after something impossible has happened. Inside the shelter, faint light glowed, not from machines or fire, but from two heartbeats beating as one. Elias lay weak, his body trembling, his eyes half open. Beside him, the small alien child Nain slept peacefully, his veins glowing soft blue like the calm sea after a storm. Lyra sat between them, her hands shaking as she wiped tears from her face. She could still feel the energy in the air, warm and alive. It was as if part of Elias's soul had wrapped itself around her child and refused to let go. The impossible had happened. The cursed child was cured, and the human who should have died was still breathing. When Elias woke, his vision was blurry. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Then he saw Nain curled up beside him. Smiling in his sleep, Elias tried to sit up, but pain shot through his body like fire. Blue light flickered beneath his skin. The same energy that once cursed Nain now lived inside him. Lyra rushed to his side. "Don't move. Your body is still changing," Elias smiled weakly. "Changing, or learning." He looked down at his hands glowing faintly with alien energy. He could feel it. The heartbeat of another life flowing within him, half human, half something new. It was both terrifying and beautiful. When Lyra checked on Nain, she saw something she had never seen before. His veins glowed softly but stayed stable. The wild energy that once burned him from the inside was now calm. "Balanced," she whispered. "He's healed." Elias nodded. "He's sharing it with me now. We're connected outside." The villagers had gathered, whispering among themselves. They had seen the explosion of light. They had seen the storm vanish in seconds. When the elder entered the shelter, he froze. He saw Elias, barely alive, yet radiating energy unlike anything in their history. He saw the child, healthy and calm, and he whispered, "The human did it." The villagers knelt silently, some out of awe, some out of fear. To them, Elias was no longer just a man, he was something else, something that blurred the line between life and legend. The elder approached him slowly. "Do you understand what you have done?" he asked. Elias's voice was faint but steady. "I gave him a piece of my life, so he could keep his." The elder frowned. "You've defied nature itself. The council will never allow this." Elias looked up, his tired eyes filled with quiet strength. "Then maybe the council needs to learn what life really means." Word spread fast, faster than the wind over the frozen plains. A human had shared his life force with another species, and both had survived. It was a miracle, and a threat. The Galactic Council, far away in their shining cities of light, received the report from the orbiting drone. They called it a violation of natural boundaries and ordered immediate investigation. While the galaxy prepared to judge him, Elias continued to heal. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between him and Nain grew stronger. They could feel each other's emotions, sometimes even their pain. When Nain laughed, Elias felt warmth in his chest. When Elias coughed, Nain held his hand as if trying to return the strength. Lyra watched them with quiet awe for years. She had been told her child was a curse, but now she saw he was something more. A bridge between worlds, between fear and hope. Between alien and human. One night, as the stars shimmered above the icy sky, she said softly, "You didn't just save him. You changed him." Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe he changed me too." But peace on Nareth 9 never lasted long. The next morning, the sound of engines echoed across the horizon. Ships descending through the clouds. Lyra ran outside and saw the metallic shadows of council patrol crafts. Her blood went cold. "They found us," she whispered. The villagers scattered in fear. The elder stood firm at the edge of the village. Watching the ships land, Elias stepped outside slowly. Leaning on a metal rod for support, he could feel the energy pulsing stronger now. Nain's energy. Alive inside him, Lyra grabbed his arm. "They'll take you away." Elias nodded. "I know." Moments later, armored soldiers stepped onto the snow, their helmets glowing with golden light. Their leader, a tall alien officer, pointed at Elias. "You are under arrest by order of the Galactic Council," he declared, "for biological contamination and forbidden energy fusion." The villagers protested, shouting, "He saved the child." But the soldiers didn't care. Laws mattered more than lives. Elias looked at Nain, who stood beside his mother, his small hands glowing softly. "Don't be afraid," he said gently. Nain's eyes filled with tears. "Will they hurt you?" Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe, but remember, warmth spreads even in the coldest place." As they led him away, snow began to fall again, covering his footprints one by one. Lyra clutched her child and whispered, "He shared his life with us, and now the stars will judge him for it." But the energy bond between Elias and Nain pulsed softly. Still alive, even across the distance, their hearts beat in rhythm. A reminder that something far greater than law had begun. And far above, in the shining towers of the Galactic Council, a voice whispered into the silence. If one human can share life itself, what else might their kind be capable of? The hall of the Galactic Council was made of light and silence. The air shimmered with authority, and every voice that dared to speak here carried the weight of 1,000 worlds. On that cold metallic floor, Elias, the lone human from a frozen planet, stood surrounded by guards. His wrists were bound by silver energy cuffs that pulsed with the same faint blue light running under his skin. Across from him sat the 12 counselors, each from a different species, each watching him as though he were both miracle and threat. Lyra stood at the far end with her child, Nain holding her tightly, their faces pale with worry. The elder of Nareth was there too, silent, unsure whether to be proud or afraid. The lead counselor, a tall being with a crystal face, spoke in a deep echoing tone. "Human Elias of Earth, you are accused of violating galactic law," he said. "By fusing your biological essence with an alien child, you have broken the natural code. Such contamination between species is forbidden." Elias stood quietly, his breath steady despite his weakness. He could feel Nain's energy inside him. Still alive, still beating with his heart, he looked up and said softly, "If saving a child is contamination, then maybe your laws are sick." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The counselor's glowing eyes flashed in anger. "You mock our order?" Elias shook his head slowly. "No, I'm reminding you that order means nothing without compassion." Lyra stepped forward before the guards could stop her. Her voice trembled but carried strength. "He saved my son when no one else would. He gave his life's warmth for a stranger, and you call that a crime?" The counselor turned coldly. "Your child is an anomaly. His survival is unnatural. The balance of energy in his veins was never meant to be." Nain, small but brave, stepped forward too, his tiny hands glowing faintly. He said in a soft, trembling voice, "He didn't hurt me. He made me warm." His innocent words echoed through the great hall. Even the guards lowered their weapons slightly. Elias smiled weakly, looking at the boy. "That's the truth you fear," he said to the council. "That warmth. It's not just human. It's what makes life worth living." One of the younger council members leaned forward, her tone unsure. "You risked your life. For a species not your own?" Elias nodded. "I didn't see a species. I saw a child freezing in the dark." The council chamber fell silent again. The lead counselor stood, his voice cold as metal. "You speak of emotion, human, but laws protect us from chaos. Without them, the galaxy would burn." Elias looked up, his eyes faintly glowing blue. Maybe, but sometimes laws built on fear burn brighter than any fire. The elder of Nereth suddenly stepped forward. Surprising everyone, he bowed before the council and said, "I once called this human mad, but I watched him give everything for life itself. If madness can bring warmth to a frozen world, then maybe we need more of it." The council chamber erupted in voices. Some demanded his execution, others called for study. But amid the chaos, Nayan walked forward, past guards, past rules, past fear. His small hand reached toward the oldest counselor, an ancient being whose body flickered weakly with dying light. The guards shouted, "Stop him!" But before they could move, Nayan's hand touched the elder's arm. A soft blue glow spread. The old counselor gasped. The energy that had been fading from his body surged back. His breathing steadied. The cracks in his crystal skin closed. The chamber fell utterly silent. Everyone stared at the boy, glowing with shared life energy. The same energy Elias had given him. The ancient counselor stood, trembling, his voice breaking. "The child healed me," he whispered. "He carries no curse, only balance." The lead counselor's face darkened, but the others turned toward him, murmuring. "Maybe the law was wrong," one said. "This could change everything," said another. Elias knelt down, his voice soft but strong. "You see? What you call contamination, I call connection. You built laws to separate life, but life keeps finding ways to reach across." The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then the ancient counselor raised his hand. "I vote for release," he said. "Let the human go. He has shown us what the galaxy has forgotten. Mercy." One by one, the votes followed. The council declared the charges lifted, and the law of biological contamination was suspended pending review. When the guards removed his cuffs, Elias took a deep breath. Lyra and Nayan ran to him. Tears streaming down their faces, Nayan hugged him tightly, whispering, "You're free." Elias smiled faintly. "No, we're free." As they stepped out of the council hall, the galaxy watched. A simple human from a forgotten planet had changed the laws of life itself. In the stories that spread afterward, people said the human didn't break the rules. He simply reminded the stars what compassion looked like. Back on Nereth 9, the ice began to melt for the first time in centuries. A warm wind blew across the plains, carrying whispers of a legend. They called him the human who shared his life. And every child, human or alien, would grow up hearing his story. The story of the man who proved that warmth could outlive the cold.